Hi, Paul Barry from Acting for Camera here. Today I'm going to teach you how to construct your very own memory palace. And that's where the title sequence would go if I had a title sequence, but I don't. So the memory palace, you may have heard of, you may have watched Sherlock Holmes and seen Benedict Cumberbatch playing Sherlock Holmes going into his memory palace to track down all of the clues that he needs to remember about this guy that he met who was a criminal, and he had this entire history that he could recall in great detail with all of the senses so he could solve the crime. The ancient Greeks also used to use the memory palace. Everybody couldn't read and everybody couldn't write, and there weren't books, everyone wasn't writing things down, so they would use these memory palaces where they would use a physical location that they remembered, and they would imagine that in their mind or construct an entirely new one in their mind in great detail, including a fence and path and stairs and columns and different wings and different levels, and each one would represent a different field of study. So one might be history, one might be geography, one might be languages, one might be health and sciences. And then each wing that they would go into would have different rooms, and each room they would go into would have different busts, and each bust would represent a different philosopher, and so on. Mega memory champions these days use exactly the same method, exactly the same technique to be able to memorize 25 random decks of playing cards, or pi to thousands of decimal places, or all of the names and numbers in a phone book if they have enough time to input the information into their brain. But the technique is incredibly simple. You just need to create the structure that you need first with enough room to put what you need in it. You can renovate it whenever you like, but you construct the basic frame for yourself to begin with, and then you start to input the information. And building the memory mansion or the memory palace or the memory place or the memory zone, whatever you want to call it, actually doesn't take that long. What takes the longest is then just inputting the information, because basically trying to memorize anything is just data entry. At least the way we do it is a lot more fun than sitting there just typing on a computer, but it's basic data entry. So if you had to enter every phone number from the phone book into a computer, it would take you a long time. And it would take you, if you learn these techniques well, it would take you about the same amount of time to memorize them perfectly forever as it would to use data entry to type those numbers into a computer. So it doesn't take a long time to learn the technique, but depending on how much you need to input into your hard drive, that's what will take the time. So the memory palace idea is that I'll use my example for you. So I just constructed a little memory house. Not a palace, it's not as elaborate as that right now, but it has a picket fence at the front. It has a pathway, it has a little letterbox on the fence, has a pathway going up to a set of steps. It has the steps, it has a porch or a veranda with a little bench chair on it. It has the front door of the house. When you open the front door, there's a little room in the front of that. Behind that room is a big living room. Off to the side of that living room is a kitchen. Off the other side of the living room is like a study. Then there's a spiral staircase to upstairs where there's a bedroom. And then there's an attic. And on top of the roof, there's a weather vane with like a rooster with north, south, east, west coming off it in the weather vane. And also on the roof is a chimney. So there are 15 different sections of the location that I've created there. And in each one of those, I can put a field of study or something that I would like to recall. So, you don't have to remember that at the moment. You will remember this because I'll be doing all of the work for you by the end of this. So the picket fence is the first thing. So we drive up in our car to this new memory McMansion, and there's a big picket fence. And the picket fence represents sports, and we know it represents sports because most sporting events have fences around them, but also sporting like athletics, there might be people jumping over fences, horses racing and jumping over fences. So we remember easily that when we think of fences, which is the first thing we see when we drive up to our memory McMansion, we see the picket fence and we think of sports. On the fence is the letterbox, and that makes sense to us. And the letterbox, I've decided, is not a big field of study. I've just added that as contacts. So I've added it as contacts so I could put phone numbers, email addresses, people's names and faces in that letterbox. So we have the sports, we have the letterbox representing contacts, and then there's the path. And the path represents games, and games could be anywhere from word games to tic-tac-toe to Trivial Pursuit to any game you want to imagine, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever you want to imagine. And that is the path. And you imagine kids doing hopscotch on that path and drawing tic-tac-toe with chalk on that path. And that path goes to the steps, and the steps represents entertainment. And I think of entertainment being the Oscars and red carpets and Grammys and so on, where people often trip up the steps in their dresses and heels or because it's too dark. So when you get to the steps in your memory palace, you imagine, tripping up the steps, and that's entertainment. How embarrassing would it be to be a big entertainer or celebrity and you trip up or down those steps? Once you go up the steps, you get to the porch or the veranda, and there's a park bench, as I say, on there, and Hemingway and Shakespeare and Sylvia Plath and Maya Angelou and all of these people are sitting there all reading their writing to each other. That's literature. So as we get onto the porch, there's the swing, and they're all sitting there and they're smoking and they're drinking and they're carousing and they're reading their literature to one another. Then there's the front door of the actual house. And on the front door you have a crucifix, and you have yin yang symbol, and you have a mezuzah, and you have crescent moon with a little star. And this represents all of the different religions and philosophies right there. So let's go back and see what we recall already. So we drive up to the house, and the first thing we see is a picket fence, and the picket fence represents things jumping over it, sports. And on the fence is a letterbox, and the letterbox represents the contacts that we're going to want to put in there later on. And then there's a pathway, and the pathway represents games of all kinds because of what the kids are drawing and playing on the pathway. Then you get to the steps, and we almost trip up the steps like the celebrities, so it's entertainment. Then we get up to the porch or the veranda, and there's a bench there, and who's sitting on there doing what are they doing? They're drinking and smoking and carousing and writing and reading. They're writing to each other. That's literature. Then we get to the front door, and the front door has all sorts of religious and philosophical symbols all over it, and we realize that's religion and philosophy. We open the door and we go into just the front room, not the rest of the house, just the front room, and we see a Swiss ball and a yoga mat, and this represents health and fitness. So we walk in, first thing we see is a yoga mat and a Swiss ball and whatever other objects that you want to put in that room to make it seem like it's health and fitness to yourself. Then we walk beyond that room and we walk into a big living room, and there's a massive TV screen, and on that TV screen is Mel Gibson and Judy Davis and Denzel Washington and all of Octavia Spencer and all of the different people that you want to see up there on that screen. That is film and TV, as distinct from entertainment, which could have been just general celebrities like Donald Trump originally, or it could have been movie stars or musicians or famous scientists like Bill Nye, but that's just celebrities. Now we're in this room, this is specifically film and TV because we've got the big TV screen. Pardon me. Now off to the right of that living room is the kitchen, but in the kitchen we've got all sorts of beakers and bowls and little Bunsen burners and pipes, and we're making science in the kitchen. So we're making that science in the kitchen. So that kitchen room represents science. On the other side of the living room is like a little study/music room, and it's got a piano and it's got a drum kit and it's got all of that kind of stuff in there. That one represents music. There is a spiral staircase going up to the room above the living room, and the spiral staircase itself represents a miscellaneous category. That's one that it could be anything. It could be just some random trivial question. It could ask you something at a quiz night. If it was asking you that, it might go into that section. So every time you want to find random information that doesn't fit the other categories, you can put it into that one. But once we get to the top of the stairs, there is the bedroom. The bedroom has a beautiful big 4-poster bed, beautiful ornate bed. And this room is languages because you speak the language of love. The language of love in that particular room. So that room represents languages. And then we have an attic above the bedroom, and the attic is just filled with old dusty books and boxes and photographs. And so the attic represents history. Above the attic, there's a weather vane, and the weather vane's like an old, pardon me, like an old rooster, and the rooster spins around and has north, south, east, west, and when the wind blows, it points in different directions, and that represents geography because it's pointing north, south, east, west, geography. If you wanted to, you could say that's geography and weather. It's up to you. You're going to construct this memory palace on your own. It might not even be anything like the one I've just described, but by the end of this, you'll be able to do mine. And when you construct your own, you'll be able to do yours as well. You could even put mine in one room of yours to prove that you've been able to memorize mine by putting it in one section of one corner of one room of your 50-bedroom mansion. That's how simple this is. Then the other thing that's on the roof, so that's the weather vane on the roof, the other thing that's on the roof is a chimney, and the chimney represents holidays. When we say Santa's stuck in the chimney, he's trying to get down to bring the kids their Christmas presents for the holidays, but holidays can be Passover, they can be Christmas, New Year, Cinco de Mayo, it doesn't matter what it is, Australia Day, but that actually represents the holidays. So when we think about it, now we can go any way we like. We can start at the fence to begin with, or we can jump around the house and we can go wherever we like. Let's say we go into the first room of the house. We've just opened the front door and we go in there. What is that? Well, we know that there's a yoga mat and there's a Swiss ball, so that's actually health and fitness. We know that if we go onto the roof, there are two things on the roof. There's a weather vane, which represents geography, and there's a chimney, which represents holidays. We know there's a path at the front of the house, and we know that represents games. We know that the room off to the left of the living room represents music because it has a drum kit and a piano. We know that the spiral staircase represents the miscellaneous category. We know that the letterbox on the front fence actually represents contacts, emails, names, faces, letters we may have received, things that we need to send ourselves, and so on. So you can practice this. It's very, very simple. Like right now, this has been 12 and a half minutes, and you've already, with me, constructed a big enough memory house, if not a memory mansion, but a big memory structure within which we can now put all of the different things into categories so that we can find them later. Further to that, once you do that, then you can say, well, in the bedroom, there's not just the bed, there is the closet, then there's a walk-in closet, and then there are shelves of the closet, and then there are shoes in the closet, there are dresses and suits in the closet, and then within each bag of each suit there are other things. This is how you will be able to memorize vast amounts of information simply, and the longest it will take is to take 10 minutes to memorize this particular tool, this actual structure of learning, and then you will be able to attach anything you want to anything else as long as you put it into the right room. So just make sure you have enough rooms and enough categories, and if you need to break one of the categories into two, or you need to combine some of the categories, that's also fine. The wonderful thing about building in your mind, being an architect in your mind, is that it doesn't actually cost you a cent to completely renovate your house or go, you know what, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to go across the street and I'm going to build an even bigger mansion. And then you can just demolish the entire lot and build another, or leave them and then move somewhere else and build another one. The wonderful thing too is once you get to geography and you say, okay, geography is this rooster on the roof. Well, you think, oh, how can I attach too many things to the rooster? Well, you don't need to, because once you get to, okay, where is geography? It's the rooster. The rooster flies away to a beautiful castle in Bavaria, and now you've constructed a massive 100-room castle in Bavaria, and the rooster just flies to exactly where you want to go in your memory. And that's why it is so much fun. This is what kids do in a way without even realizing it. And as we grow up, we're sort of taught to be a bit more logical and literal than that. But this is how fun it is. This is what mega memory champions do. And this is what every single successful person in the world has to do to get anywhere. You've got to remember names. You've got to remember numbers. You've got to remember things. and it doesn't have to be difficult. So there's a start. Like I say, 15 minutes in, you've learnt this entire thing, and I hope it's of great value to you. Feel free to subscribe and put a message down in the comments below and tell me how you went. Tell me some of the images that you came up with for your memory mansion. Anyway, have fun with that, and watch some of the other videos if you get a chance to.